There is a painful moment in some relationships that almost nobody talks about. The relationship hasn't officially ended. She hasn't said, I want to leave. She may still say, I love you. She may still answer your messages. She may still sit beside you at dinner. From the outside, everything can look completely normal, but something has changed. The warmth is different. The conversations feel different. The silence feels heavier, and somehow you can sense that the person who once seemed emotionally close is slowly becoming harder to reach. This is where many men make a serious mistake. They listen to the words, but ignore the pattern, because sometimes I love you can remain long after emotional connection has started weakening. Not always because someone is lying. Sometimes people say those words because they still care, because they are confused, because they are afraid of hurting the other person, because they love the history they share, or because part of them still wants the relationship to work. And that's why this topic is more complicated than simply asking, does she still love me? The better question is she still emotionally participating in the relationship? Because love isn't only a sentence, it's attention, it's effort, it's curiosity, it's affection, it's willingness to repair. And when those things begin disappearing one by one, the relationship can start dying quietly before anyone officially says goodbye. So if you felt something changing but couldn't explain it, pay attention, because the first sign is often so subtle that men dismiss it completely. She stops being curious about your inner world. Think about how relationships begin. You want to know everything about each other. How was your day? What are you thinking? What happened at work? What are you worried about? What are you excited about? You notice small changes, you ask questions, you want to understand. But when emotional connection begins weakening, curiosity can disappear. She may still ask practical questions. What time are you coming home? Did you pay the bill? Are you going to the appointment? But the deeper questions become less frequent. She stops asking what you're feeling. She stops asking about your dreams. She stops being interested in the stories behind your words. And eventually, you may notice something painful. You're talking, but she's not really trying to know you anymore. That's different from simply being busy. Everyone gets tired. Everyone has stressful periods. Everyone has days when they don't want to talk. The warning sign is consistency. If emotional curiosity disappears for weeks or months, while the rest of the relationship becomes increasingly distant, something may be wrong. And this leads to the second sign. She stops trying to repair small problems. This one is extremely important. Healthy relationships aren't relationships without conflict. They're relationships where two people still care enough to repair what conflict damages. You argue, you misunderstand each other, someone gets hurt, then you talk, you apologize, you try again. You learn, but when someone becomes emotionally detached, they may stop fighting for repair, and that can look strange. You bring up a problem, she says, whatever. You try to explain, she says, it's fine. You ask if something is wrong. She says, nothing. And the conversation ends. At first, you may think, great, at least we're not arguing anymore. But sometimes the absence of conflict isn't peace. Sometimes it's resignation. Because when someone still believes the relationship can improve, they're usually willing to invest some emotional energy in solving problems. When they stop believing improvement is possible, they may stop arguing because they no longer expect the conversation to change anything. That's a painful distinction. Silence can mean peace, but silence can also mean, I don't have the energy to keep trying, and you need to know which one you're experiencing. The third sign is even more subtle. She becomes physically present, but emotionally absent. She's sitting next to you, but she's somewhere else. You're eating dinner, she's scrolling, you're watching television, she's on her phone. You tell her something, she gives a short response. You walk into the room, she barely reacts. Again, don't confuse one evening with emotional disconnection. Life happens, people get tired, phones become distractions, stress affects attention. But if you repeatedly feel like you're sharing space with someone who isn't emotionally there, pay attention. Because emotional intimacy requires presence, not perfect attention every second, but genuine moments where two people look at each other and communicate, I'm here with you. When those moments become rare, the relationship can start feeling strangely lonely. And loneliness inside a relationship can be more painful than being alone. Because you're next to someone, yet you feel miles away. Now here's where many men react the wrong way. They panic, they start demanding reassurance. Do you still love me? What's wrong with you? Why are you acting different? Is there someone else? Sometimes those questions are necessary. But if they're asked repeatedly from fear, they can create even more distance. Because instead of creating a safe conversation, you're putting the other person under emotional pressure. A better approach is calm honesty. I've noticed we've felt more distant lately. I don't want to pretend everything is fine if it isn't. How are you feeling about us? That's different. You're not accusing, you're not begging, you're inviting honesty. And sometimes that's exactly what a relationship needs. Because the fourth sign is often hidden behind something that looks like independence. She stops including you in her future. At one point, everything was we. We should go there. We should try that. We could do this next year. Maybe someday we'll, but gradually the language changes. I might. I'll probably. I'm thinking about. My plans. You stop hearing we, and that shift can be revealing. Again, one conversation doesn't prove anything. People need individual lives. Healthy relationships absolutely require independence. But when future planning consistently stops including you, it can signal that the emotional picture of the future is changing. Maybe she's uncertain. Maybe she's disappointed. Maybe she needs space. Maybe she has emotionally started imagining life differently. You can't know without talking, but you shouldn't ignore the pattern either, because relationships are built not only on what two people share today, but also on the future they imagine together. When that shared future disappears from the conversation, something deserves attention. And now we reach the fifth sign. She stops sharing the small things. This one hurts because it's easy to overlook. The funny thing that happened during her day, the random thought she had, the little frustration, the story she remembered, the strange dream, the joke she wanted to tell you. These tiny things may seem insignificant, but they're actually the threads that create emotional intimacy. We don't only connect through major conversations. We connect through hundreds of ordinary moments. Guess what happened today? You're not going to believe what I saw. Do you remember that place? I just thought of something funny. Those moments say, you are one of the people I naturally think of. When someone stops sharing those things, the relationship can become purely functional. Bills, schedules, meals, responsibilities, household tasks, but not emotional life. And that's when couples can start feeling more like roommates than partners. This doesn't always mean the relationship is ending. Sometimes stress, depression, exhaustion, work, family responsibilities, or other life circumstances can cause emotional withdrawal. That's why context matters. But if the withdrawal continues and there's no willingness to reconnect, don't dismiss it. Because the little conversations often reveal the state of the bigger relationship. Now, the sixth sign may be the hardest one to accept. She seems more emotionally energized everywhere else. Maybe she laughs freely with friends. She becomes animated around coworkers. She talks enthusiastically about hobbies. She seems excited when she's somewhere else, but around you. She becomes flat, quiet, distant. Again, don't become jealous of every person in her life. That's not the point. The point is the contrast. If she has emotional energy, but consistently stops bringing that energy into the relationship, ask yourself why. Maybe she feels misunderstood. Maybe she feels criticized. Maybe the relationship has accumulated resentment. Maybe she no longer feels emotionally safe. Or maybe she's already begun detaching. The answer isn't to compete with everyone else. The answer is to understand what's happening between the two of you. And this is where the seventh sign becomes the most important of all. She stops trying to be understood by you. This sounds strange, but think about it. When someone cares deeply about being emotionally connected, they usually want you to understand them. They explain, they clarify, they tell you why something hurt, they try to make you see their perspective. They may even repeat themselves because they desperately want you to understand. But when someone becomes emotionally exhausted, something can change. They stop explaining, they stop arguing their point, they stop trying to convince you. They simply say, forget it, never mind, it's okay, do whatever you want. And sometimes those words don't mean everything is okay. They mean, I don't believe explaining this will change anything anymore. That's one of the most painful signs in a relationship. Because anger still contains energy, frustration still contains hope. But emotional indifference can mean the person has started letting go. And if you're a man who recognizes this, don't panic. Don't immediately assume the relationship is finished. Recognize that a warning sign is not a final verdict. People change, relationships change, and sometimes connection can be rebuilt. But rebuilding requires something many couples avoid: an honest conversation without defense. Not, you're the problem, and not, you never appreciate me, and not, I've done everything for you. Instead, I feel like we've become distant, and I don't want us to ignore it. Is there something you've been needing from me that you haven't been able to say? Do you still want to work on this relationship? Those questions may be uncomfortable, but sometimes discomfort is the doorway to truth. And truth is better than spending years pretending. Now there's something especially important for men over 55. At this stage of life, you may have decades of history with someone. Children may be grown. Careers may be changing. Retirement may be approaching. Health concerns may appear. Parents may need support. The structure of life changes. And sometimes couples discover that the relationship they built around responsibilities doesn't automatically know how to survive when those responsibilities change. For years, maybe the relationship was about raising children, working, paying bills, building a home, managing family responsibilities. Then suddenly, life becomes quieter, and you look across the table and realize we haven't really talked in years. That realization can be terrifying. But it can also be an opportunity, because if the relationship still has willingness on both sides, this can be the moment when you stop being simply partners in responsibility and start becoming partners again. That requires curiosity. Ask her what she wants now. Ask what she misses. Ask what she feels has changed. And don't only listen for answers that make you comfortable. Listen for the truth. Maybe she misses affection. Maybe she misses conversation. Maybe she feels unseen. Maybe she feels taken for granted. Maybe she needs more independence. Maybe she wants more romance. Maybe she doesn't know what she wants yet. Your job isn't to immediately solve everything. Your first job is to understand. And this is where emotional maturity becomes powerful. You don't have to win the conversation. You have to protect the relationship from becoming a place where neither person feels heard. Because sometimes a relationship doesn't fall apart because two people stopped loving each other. Sometimes it falls apart because they stopped understanding each other. And that's something that can sometimes be repaired. But there is one thing you should never do. Don't beg someone to stay while ignoring what caused them to want to leave. Begging may create temporary guilt. It doesn't create connection. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't suddenly become perfect for 3 days and then return to the same habits. Real change is consistent. If she tells you she feels ignored, start listening. If she says you never spend time together, create meaningful time. If she says every conversation becomes an argument, learn to communicate differently. If you've become emotionally unavailable, acknowledge it. And if you have made mistakes, don't hide behind pride. A sincere apology isn't weakness, it's accountability. But there's another side. You cannot rebuild a relationship alone. This is crucial. If one person is trying and the other person has completely checked out, you cannot carry both sides forever. Love requires participation. Repair requires participation. Trust requires participation. You can open the door. You can start the conversation. You can change your behavior, but the other person must choose to walk toward you too. That's why one of the most important questions isn't, does she still love me? It's, is she willing to work with me to rebuild what we've lost? Because someone can still love you and still be unhappy. Someone can still care about you and still feel emotionally disconnected. Someone can still remember beautiful years together and still not know whether they can continue. Love and compatibility are not always the same thing. And that's why honesty matters. If she says she wants to try, don't just celebrate the words. Look for action. Does she participate? Does she communicate? Does she make changes? Does she become more open? Do you become more open? Does the relationship slowly regain warmth? That's how you know rebuilding is actually happening. Not because everything suddenly becomes perfect, but because both people begin moving toward each other again. And if she says she doesn't want to continue, that truth may be painful. But you deserve truth too. A relationship should not require one person to constantly chase someone who has already emotionally left. Sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is accept reality with dignity, not because he doesn't care, but because he understands that love cannot be forced. Still, before you reach that conclusion, have the conversation. Don't spend months interpreting silence. Ask, listen, speak honestly, and pay attention to behavior over time. Because the most dangerous thing isn't always a relationship ending. Sometimes it's two people remaining together for years while emotionally living separate lives. That kind of loneliness can become invisible, and that's why these 7 signs matter, not as a checklist for proving that your partner is leaving, but as a warning to wake up. Maybe she's still saying, I love you. Believe that she may mean it, but also look at what the relationship has become. Is there curiosity? Is there effort? Is there affection? Is there repair? Is there shared future planning? Is there emotional sharing? Is there a willingness to understand each other? If those things are disappearing, don't ignore the warning. And if they're still present, don't take them for granted, because relationships don't usually collapse in one dramatic moment. They often weaken through tiny moments nobody addresses. One conversation avoided, one apology never given, one resentment ignored, one night spent emotionally distant, one important question never asked, one feeling swallowed. Then another and another, until one day, 2 people look at each other and wonder how they became strangers. Don't wait for that day. If you feel distance, address it while there is still something to repair. Put the phone away, sit down, look at her, and ask something simple. Are we okay? But don't ask it if you're only prepared to hear yes. Ask it because you're prepared to hear the truth. Maybe she says yes. Maybe she says no. Maybe she cries. Maybe she becomes angry. Maybe she says she doesn't know. Whatever happens, listen. Because sometimes the relationship can be saved in the conversation you were both afraid to have. And sometimes the truth will tell you that it's time to let go. Either way, clarity is better than pretending. And if you're over 55, remember something important. Your life isn't over because a relationship is changing. You are not too old to reconnect. You are not too old to apologize. You are not too old to fall in love again. And you are certainly not too old to become a better partner. If your relationship can be repaired, Fight for it with wisdom, not desperation. If it cannot, walk away with dignity, not bitterness. But before you make either decision, make sure you've truly listened. Because sometimes the woman who says, I love you, but seems distant isn't secretly preparing to leave. Sometimes she's silently asking, do you still see me? Do you still hear me? Do you still care about the person I am now? And maybe the relationship doesn't need a grand gesture. Maybe it needs two people to stop performing their roles and start talking to each other again. So if you've noticed these 7 signs, don't immediately assume it's over. Treat them as an invitation to pay attention, ask questions, listen without defending yourself, take responsibility where necessary. Give affection without expecting something in return. Make time, create new memories, and most importantly, find out whether both of you still want the same thing. Because love isn't proven by saying, I love you, once a day. It's proven in the small choices that follow those words. The listening, the effort, the forgiveness, the curiosity, the patience, the decision to keep showing up. And if those things are still alive, even beneath layers of disappointment, there may be something worth rebuilding. But if they are completely gone, if there is no curiosity, no effort, no repair, no shared future, and no desire to reconnect, then perhaps the hardest truth is also the most liberating. Sometimes someone can still love the memories of you, while no longer being able to build a future with you, and knowing that difference can save you years of confusion. So don't just listen to the words. Look at the relationship. Look at the effort. Look at the emotional connection. And look honestly at yourself too, because sometimes the relationship we fear losing is the relationship we've stopped nurturing. And sometimes the person we think is letting go is actually waiting to see whether we will finally reach out with understanding instead of fear. The question isn't simply whether she still says, I love you. The real question is there still enough love, trust, effort, and courage on both sides to turn those words into a life together? If the answer is yes, don't waste another day taking each other for granted. And if the answer is no, don't spend the rest of your life pretending. Because love deserves honesty, and so do you.